Hello. Today in this podcast review, we're going to look at Entertainment Law Update podcast with Gordon P. Firemark. We're looking at episode 61, where special guest host Tamara Bennett, and they are discussing blurred lines and directors going to jail. So uh, I wanted to go ahead and get into our first topic, which is the controversy with Blurred Lines, the song with Robin Thicke featuring T.I. and Pharrell, and the Marvin Gaye family. Um, in this claim, the Gaye family is arguing that they are being infringed. The song "Got to Give It Up" is being infringed upon by the song "Blurred Lines," uh, and throughout this trial, there have been several different things that have helped to determine the positions of both parties. Specifically in the podcast, though, they address the fact that there's a lot of inconsistencies of accounts, especially with Robin Thicke, as to who or who did not write the song and who was or who was not inspirations for the song. With that, they said during trial, the only thing that they wanted the jury to recognize was the deposition and not his media interviews, because the interviews is where all the inconsistencies lie. There's also the issue of inspiration, um, where Pharrell argues back and forth as to whether or not this song was particularly inspired by Gaye's "Got to Give It Up" during the process of the writing of the song, or if it was just familiar with the same type of genre or same type of style. Because in the podcast, they also address the fact that styles cannot be, no one can have a copyright or ownership over a particular style of music or genre of music. What was also interesting was the claim that whether or not Universal did or did not know that the two songs had infringement issues, because Universal Music Group owned both songs. They own Marvin Gaye's "Got to Give It Up," and they also own Blurred Lines. So there is evidence in emails that there was song sampling, um, which also alluded to the question as to why the songwriters Thicke or Pharrell did not actually sue the label for allowing them to continue in the development of the song when they knew they might possibly face infringement issues. However, this is still ongoing, and the family has also added an injunction to receive not only the damages that they have been awarded, which is 7.4 million, plus um, what is decided upon as far as their percentage for the infringement, or so for all of the revenues, the publishing revenues with the infringement. But also they've put in an injunction against the distribution of the song and for other participants such as T.I., who was not involved in the first claim that they put in. The next discussion that they got into in the podcast was Midnight Rider movie was in production, and during the filming, Sarah Jones was killed by a train while filming on the tracks. The director was charged with involuntary manslaughter, but also criminally charged because the rail line refused permission to film there and they trespassed to complete this scene. So after the hearing, the director was sentenced to 10 years and prohibited from directing or leading any film crews thereafter. He pled guilty, mostly because, from what the podcast hosts say, because he's to keep his wife out of jail, because she would also have been liable, being a producer in the film as well. And after the incident, assistant directors and other executive director faced probation. Now, the proper protocol is to send people in both directions of the train tracks, or either way, for 1 or 2 miles, so that they can be on radio and give fair warning for incoming train or any oncoming trains. However, it is ultimately the responsibility of the director and producers for the safety of the shooting, um, at any given time. The last thing I wanted to get into on the podcast was the multi-channel networks on YouTube, or MCNs. There's an issue recently with YouTube and some companies who use multiple brands, or have multiple brands working through different channels all on YouTube, and they're using um, music on those channels. Freeplay seems to be free and have unlimited free usage of, or royalty free music, but how they advertise and what is actually going on are separate. Apparently, Freeplay is now suing several of those multi-channel networks for use of their music because they are not, in actuality, a royalty-free music service. Now, the podcast made very interesting points to discuss whether or not this was deceptive advertising and marketing, or, and regardless of whether it was or not, whether the consumer is the final person who should be at fault for not reading the fine print, or the companies or the networks who should be paying attention to whether or not they are due royalties to whatever services that they are receiving. So Freeplay wants statutory damages in about $150,000 due to these royalty issues. However, to piggyback on what the podcasters were saying, in California, there's an unfair business statute that addresses deceptive trade. And it would be interesting if it goes to trial to see whether or not they would argue to a jury the fact that free play isn't free. And how does that fall on, or if that does in fact fall under the category of deceptive trade, or a bait and switch, as it were. And that just about sums up some of the key points of the podcast. Uh, Thank you.